Welcome to ebidtopay. You can basically log in just with the browser, both as buyer and supplier, and this is any browser. When you log in, you come to the dashboard where you see your open tasks. I've been a bad boy. I had 492 open to-dos, but it's very fast to approve and close a to-do, as you see, like approving a milestone on an RFQ. What you can also do in the dashboard is see, are there any ongoing pooling initiatives like the forklift pooling we're seeing right now? Here you can join pooling initiatives across sites and, for instance, subscribe and say, if the price is right, I'll have 30 electrohydraulic forklifts, etc. This is really great to create synergies and harvest them in a big corporation. From the dashboard, you can also access the spend analysis. Here you see the spend over time, the total spend, the raw materials, the spend per region, monthly spend trend, the top 5 vendors. This is highly configurable. Just some other views, like a pie chart, where you can pick the regions and see what percentages each region contributes. Drilling down on Spain, on Germany, or Nordics, Japan, seeing how the top 5 vendors change. And finally, even seeing the development of the material cost in the selected areas, the increases, and the action taken to reduce them. Quite popular is also an ABC analysis, a kind of portfolio views where you can even see by category what you're spending with each vendor. And finally, also a regional view. We are seeing where those vendors are actually located, and you can zoom in, zoom out, and see exactly what kind of spend you're having where. We are basically having here also a display of all the requisitions, maybe replicated from SAP. You see the list of your ongoing RFX, you see your auctions, you see your favorite shopping carts, and you can also see the used free forms. Finally, there can be all kinds of spend analysis, like what contracts are active, what are your top suppliers, what are your ongoing RFPs and RFQs, and how did it develop over time? And finally, you can even manage savings ideas with this system, like a couple of examples, a project on complexity reduction, open innovation, how to reduce cost, collection of scrap, spend avoidance, or cost reduction by simply being more digital. So it's pretty comprehensive and you have all information on one view. Let's look at the system. The system is available in 20 languages and we also offer Hebrew, and by default the system is always displayed in the language of the user. So here you're having a view how the system looks in Hebrew, and you see it is automatically scaled the right way. As I don't know Hebrew, I'm turning back to English, which is a lot more readable for me. And let's move into the real work with the system. So imagine that you actually received a requisition from SAP. That's something you need. 10 hospitals of this type. In total, some 7 hospital beds. Could be anything, could be a construction project. But this kind of requisition would be automatically replicated from SAP And you could then basically also transform it into an RFP or RFQ. So let's assume this has arrived from SAP. So now you can actually create an RFP or RFQ simply by clicking a button and picking the good template. So this could be a closed RFP if the purchase volume is above X LS. Could be a closed RFQ if the purchase value is below X LS. Or an open RFP into which you might invite also vendors that are not yet in your SAP system, so they can freely register from the web, maybe on the governance side, according to the procedure which is basically published by the government. So let's create a closed RFQ from this requisition which has come from SAP. RFQ and RFP templates on ebidtopay are very powerful. You can basically pre-configure everything in an automatic way in a template. It could already have the desired start and end date when an RFQ is published. You could already have your standard team invited. In the current case, myself, I'm buyer 1, the event creator, but by default the system already invites a buyer 2 who is basically involved in the evaluation of the offers, a more quality-oriented colleagues, better quality, who might assess the quality, and finally a colleague called Head SCM, who for instance might be representing the RFP committee, which finally will decide on which vendor wins the business. So those teams can automatically be set from the template. Good news is that in a way you can actually set everything on template level. Even invite your favorite supplier panel. In this case, I've not done it. There's a wrong supplier in the template, which I eliminate. And I just go to my supplier database. And here I can actually search by a number of criteria. Basically, for instance, by the company name, by the DUNS number, by the activity, maybe by the status of a vendor, like is he a prospective vendor who's not yet done business? Is he a conditionally approved vendor, a fully approved vendor? So you can actually choose which supplier statuses you support, and you can manage them by category. You could search by country, you could search also by contact details. Another favorite one would be to actually search by category. So you could be, for instance, looking for hospital and see which vendors are actually providing hospital related goods. And you would find in the closed RFP all those vendors which are already registered in your SAP system. I can basically select them all and now put them into my event. Those vendors are automatically being synchronized with SAP, which is the leading system. So you don't have to worry. All data will be up to date whenever you paste them. So here we have 4 vendors from Tel Aviv. Those are dummy vendors. It's just a demo example, but you'd be having automatically the most important information, like the approval status, the address, their contact details, and other columns you'd like to see here. In the template, we'd also be having some general information which you always need to have according to the procedure in your closed RFQ. Let's have a look. For instance, you could have a reference to the SEP requisition, which would be automatically filled, having the appropriate number. You could be also putting some references to catalog, like hospital beds catalog. You might have the estimated cost in local currency, let's say 6 million. And this might also be automatically filled, the RFP type and topic. So it's a closed RFQ on hospital beds. And there is an intention to close a contract for 24 months. Those fields here will be only filled by the suppliers, whereas those in light blue are actually fields which are only visible for the buyer. Additionally, you will find your positions from the requisition. Let's have a look. So, according to the template, you would be always receiving the catalog number ID, maybe another production number, the manufacturer, the price, and for instance an additional discount if it's more than 50 units. You can actually freely decide which fields you want here. So you can have any number of fields and any amount of details. It's just now an example that we're showing here. So now I'm bidding and I'm going through the routine. I hope your vendors are more careful. So I'm done. I'm once more checking all my elements. I actually have a countdown how much remaining time I have, and I'm now saving and publishing my bid to the bidders. Additionally, I could be uploading some supportive documents. Just to give you an idea, I would be again going to my hard disk and, for instance, upload a signed quality document and save it. And maybe upload my signed code of conduct. And here we are. I can once more go to my bid, check if everything is in order. So I've been bidding, everything's good, I disconnect. ebidtopay is probably the best system for direct materials sourcing on the market. You can do very powerful cost breakdowns, SLAs. Suppliers can fill it in Excel or online. You can directly type and modify in this kind of virtual Excel. You can include bill of materials and drawings. My task today is to onboard a new supplier, and for this there is a specific menu on the supplier management where I can send an invitation to register to a supplier. I've met on a fair a company called DBW, and I only have a general email address, and I contact them. With this registration mail, they get all the necessary elements, the URL, the username and password, then to register and fulfill all their information. And I'm changing the browser. I'm going to actually use my Edge browser to register as the new supplier who's been informed by an email. He's going to the standard new supplier registration form, and this can be fully configured and customized according to the needs of the individual user company. So the company in question is called DBV. There is an immediate alert on the kind of mandatory information you have to put, like the tax ID. Depending on countries, there's also the need for a company registration number, which in this case is the following. And there is also other fields like a standard EU number, but this really depends on for which country this registration is. The system can be linked to DANS, Bureau van Dijk, etc. And in order to find maybe some pre-stored data, and to avoid duplicates, you can enter the DUNS number. Just put something arbitrary here. And clearly you have to put the postal address. It's in a town called Bovenden in Germany. There's at least mandatory one telephone number to put, which in the present case is the following. You have to put an email address. And finally, you can also link specific information you want to have, like wire transfer account number. It's just one of the options which we can have for payment. I'm going to show some more elaborate on some forms upcoming in a second. You can put the bank and a transfer limit required in some jurisdictions. You can confirm that you accept digital checks, that you accept PayPal, maybe explain that you also accept Bitcoin payments. Kind of answer times you can configure according to the needs. Accepting GDPR is a typical one. And the system actually helps you to have a login name suggested. And then, depending on onboarding process, there's additional information being requested. For the invoicing, you might, for instance, upload your invoice header and your invoice footer, something I'm going to show in some other demo cases. You can manage your addresses, like the invoicing address, a remit address, and you can actually add additional bank accounts, as many as you want, in order to really manage all possible situations as a company. And you can also have multiple addresses in terms of handlings that are needed for your business. We support that a company can pre-classify itself according to the category tree of the buying organization. In this case, it's about fiber technology. So I select one of those. This is UNS PSC, but the coding and the category tree can be adapted, and there can be actually multiple category trees if needed for international organizations. You can then also fill in your certificates, like putting an ISO certificate. You can basically browse and pick it from your hard disk and upload it. You have to give it a certificate name. You have to pick the validity period. Ours is valid until November 23rd. And here you go, it's uploaded. As a buying company, you can basically prescribe which certificates are mandatory, which are optional, and this can also depend on the category a vendor wants to provide. But it's not only about certificates, it's also about Code of Ethics, Hub Zone certification, LGBTQ's business certification, MBE certification. So you can basically give additional dimensions for a supplier to qualify. And I'm now going to upload my Hub Zone certification. Works the same way. I browse on the hard disk, I pick my certificate, and additionally gives the validity, which again is November. And just to once more show how it works, I'm also uploading my LGBTQ certificate. Here we go. And this one is valid until 2023. And you can also specify who can now modify it. All those documents are versioned, so you will have full transparency. What is important specifically for multinational companies is to know where is a supplier present, where can he actually provide. So in the present example, this supplier is present in Germany, but there's also another subsidiary in Denmark. So we're picking those countries, and once you've provided all the mandatory information, you can basically then save and go to the next step. And if you've given all the mandatory information, you get actually more menus, like a menu to see your orders, a menu to see your RFX, your contracts, and you're onboarded. Let's move back to the buyer. Once you've registered, the buyer who has asked you is getting alerted that you've filled all the mandatory fields, and he might now continue to request an official approval for specific categories or regions. I'm going to show you how that works. So I can now select which status do I want. I want this supplier to be approved. I want him to be approved to be invited into RFQs. I want him to be approved for contract ordering and for payment for all the categories. But in order to make the approval not too complex, I want him just approved for Germany. And I explained to my colleagues that I saw samples and they are truly great. Once I've saved the status change, an email goes out and informs my colleagues. There's in this case a 3-step approval process with finance, legal and supply chain management, checking the new vendor. Is he adding just complexity or does he really bring us ahead? So I'm now going to my Safari browser where I have my finance responsible. I'm just briefly updating my to-do list, and there it is, the approval task for DBWA. Finance guy has to now check some documentation, like is a non-disclosure agreement fulfilled. You can configure and customize this list exactly to the needs of your functions. So finance has approved, and once finance has approved, there goes an alert out to legal, who is actually logged under my Opera browser. I'm again just refreshing my page to have an up-to-date to-do list, and there it is, a new task to approve from legal side this supplier. NDA seems in order and nothing worrisome. So legal also has approved. And finally, this is going to head of supply chain management, who's connected under my Edge browser. Refreshing the page, getting the up-to-date to-do list. There it is. And now we have the third approval, and this supplier is fully onboarded. You can use him in events. Now I've been showing you a very simple onboarding process, but clearly our customers are having also more elaborate onboarding procedures. And one element to make it better is to have connected information providers. With ebidtopay, the onboarding is really configurable, and you can configure it to your needs. For instance, this customer of ours, it's a 20 billion sales, 18-country multinational organization called MOL Group. They're present in Asia, they're present in Europe, they're present everywhere there's petrol. And now, in this case, we're connected to Bureau van Dijk, but we have similar standard connections to Dun & Bradstreet, to Risk Methods, to EcoVadis, to Rapid Ratings. And if a vendor is now trying to onboard, and let's have a bit of fun, I'm taking Gardner, and let's pick now Germany as a country. Then in the background, Bureau van Dijk is finding the information that is stored, making life a lot simpler. And I've once recorded actually a video in the Lehrer-Wirth-Straße together with Debbie Wilson. So now it's collecting all those information and making sure you're not creating any duplicates of a supplier, and that some base information is already filled. What's important are also the details. You see here on the right side you have the original elements of Bureau van Dijk, whereas on the left side you can now improve and potentially change some elements if something is missing. Also, finance information is provided, allowing here in this case a detailed risk score according to specific balance arithmetics of our customer MOL. So that's just a little glimpse of what can be done on top. Clearly we have pre-made forms for ASICs, for HSE, and a lot of templates that allow you, even without the information providers, to have a great score and have a almost sure picture if you can trust this new vendor in the area you want to work with.